right, Keyshawn, let's start with you here. Who would you take in a Super Bowl? Joe Montana or Tom Brady?
In the Super Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
One guy's been to 10, one guy's been to 4, but the 4, he's 4-0. He never threw an interception. And, I mean, I got to go with Montana. It's weird because of what Brady was able to do in some of those Super Bowls, but Montana was just, it was just different to me. I'm sorry. It was just different to me. He was as cool as ice. He just 3 MVPs, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. This is a hard one, but I gotta go with Montana. And I know Dan probably disagrees with me based on Tom Brady's, tenure in the Super Bowls and record in the Super Bowls. Joe was 4-0, man. He just was 4-0.
This is like the Jordan LeBron argument, right? Key, when we started this show, you asked me, I forgot to tell you, you asked me, was I just coming in from the casinos out here in Vegas? It's 7 a.m. out here. No, last night was one of those moments in my life where I was like, yo, Dan, you're a straight up loser. I went down, ate dinner by myself, and I was asleep at 9 o'clock in Las Vegas. So it was a reminder how kind of simple of a life I'd like to live. One, we got an example from Mike Francesa of what makes like Northeastern people, mainly New York people, so interesting when it comes to sports conversation. Because the fact that he thought of that in the way that he described this situation instantly, like I've never heard of the description. He's the best regular season quarterback, but he's not the best playoff quarterback, and maybe they're not the best Super Bowl quarterback. I didn't even know those things existed. I'm going to go with Tom Brady. I grew up in the Brady era, so that definitely has a part of this. I didn't really ever see, to my recollection, Montana in a Super Bowl unless I was super young. Unless I was super young. Here's I guess the one reason why I find Brady over Montana. I love Joe Montana. In Joe Montana's 4 wins, which he's 4-0 in the Super Bowl, 3-time MVP, he has thrown for, I got the numbers, 1,142 yards and 11 touchdowns, okay? Tom Brady in his 10 Super Bowls is 7-3, all right? In the 3 Super Bowl losses, Brady's thrown for over 1,000 yards. So he's thrown for basically the same amount of yards in his losses that Joe Montana has done so in his wins. Now, Montana had 11 touchdowns. Brady threw 7 in those 3 losses. So he's got a little bit of an advantage in the touchdown area. But I just look at the 3 losses that Brady has, and I go, well, 2 of them are to the Giants when the Giants' defensive line was absolutely dominant, and they had a Hall of Famer in Michael Strahan play like a Hall of Famer. And then in one of those losses to the Philadelphia Eagles, I think they scored 40-plus points, and he threw for 500 yards, which, again, is almost half of what Montana threw in all 4 of his Super Bowls. So for a guy that's 7-3 and those 3 losses to equate the way that they did, Brady's the best quarterback I've ever seen. I think it's hard to compartmentalize when he was the best.
It is, Dan. There's no question about it, but you broke it down a certain way. Just remember, 0 INTs. We don't like our quarterbacks to throw interceptions. And look, I understand. It's 6 over a 10-game span. I understand that. I get that. But then when you also think about Joe Montana's situation in yardage, it was a different era. They didn't throw the ball all over the lot, right? They just didn't. That wasn't the time span. But on top of that, you have to think about Brady's first several Super Bowls. He gets the credit because he was the quarterback. He gets the credit.
Complete team stuff, yeah.
But it was Willie McGinnis and Teddy Bruschi and company and Lawyer Malloy and Ty Law. It was a lot of that. And Adam Vinatieri on the 50-yard field goals. So it was a little bit different. So what I like to do when they come to this conversation is I like to take 3 of those Super Bowls and push them to the side, even though you probably can't do it because they're still W's. But when you start talking about
this morning.
No, I do that
what
because
3 Super Bowls are we pushing to the side?
The first 3. The first 3 I'm going to push to the side. I'm just going to push them to the side.
The first one, he leads him on a game-winning drive for a field goal.
The first one, he throws a shallow cross to Troy Brown. He checks down to Redmond. Don't get me started on those Super Bowls, Dan. I was playing in the league at this time. I'm just saying for conversation.
You're in your 15th year.
Yeah, whatever. Just for the conversation's sake, right? I'm saying that if you push those aside, he's 4-3 in the Super Bowls. You just push. You just push him aside.
Push him to the side. They never happened.
No, but you can give him credit. I'm talking about Montana was the reason they were 4-0 is all I'm saying. the reason. Well, Tom Brady on the 4 and 3 was the reason in '07 that they lost the 3 when he was part of the team, and he won those 4. The other 3, it was such a defensive-oriented team.
Didn't they skunk someone like 56-0 in the Super Bowl? The 49ers? Then they blew the door.
And the Broncos.
So how was it?
He beat the Broncos down because he was ridiculously throwing the football all over the lot. And they was
gave
doing
up
their
0
thing.
points.
Oh,
they gave up 0 points. He threw to the greatest wide receiver ever. John Kittle was an absolute stud.
Yes.
Rathman was a stud.
Yes, they had a stud team. They did.
So was it just...
But guess what?
How can we just erase 3 Super Bowls and think like, it was they won 56-0.
I'm just telling you, you had to see Joe Cool, though, Dan. You had to. Look, this
56-10.
This argument,
Thank you, producer.
all Montana people would praise me, and all Brady people would hate me, and vice versa right now on this conversation. Now, ask me which one I would rather play with. I take their left hands compared to some of the quarterbacks that I played with in my career, because that's just the reality of it.
You always find a way to take the shots at the quarterbacks you play with, man. You always find a way to take the shots.
I didn't say all of them. I said some.
When we got this question, I chuckled. I honestly chuckled because I was like,
it's
okay,
hard. It's hard.
you're gonna win a bunch of. You are 11-3 in the history of the Super Bowls between these two guys. I just think because of the moments, because of the performance by Tom, even in his losses, that aren't all that different than the performance by Joe Montana in the wins. I'd take Tom Brady.
And let me help you on the Brady argument of regular season. First of all, what Francesca was saying, I don't buy. Because Tom Brady had to do something to get those teams in a position to even make the playoffs during the regular season. So I don't buy he's not even the best regular season quarterback. Because if my mind serves me right, he had the number 1 or the number 2 seed in many of those Super Bowls.
One or the other. Yeah, it's going to be tricky. I mean, look, you mentioned Derek Carr. I think, Jacoby Brissett is going to be out there trying to convince somebody he's their starter. I mean, that's where we are. And, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, those guys are free agents, but I think everybody thinks they're probably likely to stay where they are, right? Anything can happen, but, it's going to be tough. I mean, there's the entire NFC South needs a quarterback, right? All 4 teams. The Raiders need to figure something out. And
Dan, the Raiders haven't given Carr permission yet, huh?
Well, no. Permission for what?
To seek a trade.
No, the Raiders would love to trade Carr, but
have they given him permission, him and his representatives?
Well,
I read somewhere that they didn't.
No, see, the deal is he has a no-trade clause, so, they could come to him with a deal, and then he could say yes or no to it.
Okay.
But the trick with Carr is on February 15th, his money for this year becomes guaranteed, and a chunk of next year's money. So if you're Carr, you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to agree to a trade. Why would I help the Raiders? No, either cut me so I can go be a free agent, pick my team, or, I'm happy to stay and have that money guaranteed 3 days after the Super Bowl.
Right, so they will cut him.
I think so. I think unless he wants to do them the favor of agreeing to a trade.
Which he won't. So really, if you have the cash, you can go get Derek Carr if you want.
If you want to. I mean, look, what's a starting quarterback on the market going to go for these days? 35 plus, 35, 40 million a year? Yeah.
Derek Carr
you have that to spend?
Absolutely.
So Dan, if you're the 49ers, do you try to get a guy like Derek Carr?
Well, Kyle said yesterday that they weren't going to get what was the expression? Like a high-end veteran quarterback? I think they're going to need to probably look at bringing in a veteran because of the uncertain health status of Lance and Purdy. So, I mentioned Brissett, right? Here's a guy that you've seen. He held it down until Deshaun Watson came back. He filled that role pretty well for Cleveland.
He was okay.
So if you don't think – right, but if you're saying, well, we need a guy who can start maybe the first 4 or 5 games of the season, and I'm just pulling that number. I have no idea how many.
Not bury you. Yeah.
And then be a reliable backup the rest of the way. That's a pretty good guy that fits that description. So I don't know whether he's going to be looking for something more than that. And it is going to be a little bit of a seller's market there because there's probably more demand than supply. But I think if you're the 49ers, you have to look at some kind of veteran option in case those guys aren't ready to start the season.
Dan, obviously seeing Sean Payton go to Denver the other day, do you think it was a mistake for the Cowboys or the Chargers not to go after Payton?
Yes, I think he's a better coach than the coaches they have. But